What is going on, Hive Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're going to pit intermittent fasting versus the Mediterranean diet and the paleo diet. So a recent study came out looking at the consensus #1 diet in the world by all the medical professionals and dietitians being the Mediterranean diet, and this is the consensus because US News always scores this the #1 diet of the year every single year, versus intermittent fasting, and even to just throw another wrench into this study, the paleo diet. They looked at weight loss and metabolic health and compared the three to see which one comes out on top. I'm gonna go ahead and break that down in this video. Stay tuned. Okay, jumping right into the video, a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by Michelle Jospy and colleagues looked at these three different protocols: the Mediterranean diet, the paleo diet, and intermittent fasting. And it was a unique setup and a long-term setup, which is really good because that methodology can give us more data points on what happens when people use intermittent fasting longer term, as that's one of the arguments that a lot of dietitians and a lot of medical professionals that are against the intermittent fasting protocol love to tout is, well, okay, the intermittent fasting has been doing good for the 6 months, but we haven't seen anything for a year or 2 years, so we don't have any long-term studies. So we don't want to say that it's better than caloric restriction or any other diet. Okay, so we have a few studies that have gone beyond the 6-month period, going into a year, and then some observational studies that go into 2 years. And the 6-month studies have shown many benefits for the intermittent fasting protocol versus other diet protocols. But this particular study took 250 overweight, healthy adults, metabolically healthy, although they were overweight, metabolically they were healthy. And then they went into this study allowing everyone in this group to select which diet they wanted to do, which is pretty cool. So they had them sit down, they gave them a 30-minute session on each of these protocols. So they talked about the Mediterranean diet, the studies behind it, and the benefits that you can get from it. They did that with the paleo diet, and they did that with the intermittent fasting diet. And not surprisingly, the majority, over 54%, selected the intermittent fasting protocol, and that was followed by the Mediterranean diet, in which 27% selected the Mediterranean diet, and then after that 18.4% selected the paleo diet. So the intermittent fasting diet, on face value, with this small group of 250 people, was more appealing than the other diets. Keep in mind that they were informed of the Mediterranean diet being the #1 diet that's recommended by dietitians and medical doctors, and they still selected the intermittent fasting protocol against those notions that people just don't want to do this because of the fasting. It's so off-putting, but people still look at it and say, that seems so much easier to do. So it goes against that narrative that a lot of people push out there, that people don't want to do intermittent fasting because it's just too hard, they're going to be starving themselves. A lot of people are opening their minds, opening their eyes, and seeing that this seems a little bit easier than me having to specifically focus so much, so heavy on exactly the foods that I'm eating. Now, this study has a lot of limitations. One good thing about the study is that it looked at 6-month variations and it looked at the 12-month variations. The one that underperformed the most out of the three was the paleo diet. It did not show better health markers at the end of the 6-month or 12-month range, or better weight loss at the end of the 6-month and 12-month range. Now, the one that had the most weight loss from the 6-month range and the 12-month range was the intermittent fasting protocol. Now, although the Mediterranean diet has been touted as the best diet because of what the diet includes, it focuses on whole foods, plants, it minimizes the consumption of things like red meat, but allows for a minimal amount of animal products to be consumed. While intermittent fasting group, they were told to eat ad libitum, and they were just given a recommendation of try to eat healthy. They were just told, hey, wing it, here's some parameters that might help you. Try to eat high protein and low carbohydrates to increase satiety because you're going to be fasting for certain periods of time. But that's all the information you need, so just run with that. And the Mediterranean diet is designed specifically to tell you what you need to eat. So even with that element there, ad libitum, the intermittent fasting group lost more weight at the 6-month mark and at the 12-month mark. But the Mediterranean diet did edge out the intermittent fasting protocol in regards to metabolic health. Blood pressure was reduced well in both groups, but it was slightly better with the Mediterranean group. So at 6 months, there was good adherence within the Mediterranean group and the intermittent fasting group. The paleo group started to fall off of it. So the number of people in that group started to reduce as they decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. But at the 12-month period, there was a major 50% drop from the groups from both Mediterranean and intermittent fasting. So adherence was virtually the same in terms of both groups at the 12-month period. Now, this was simply observational and it was self-reported as well. So this study has a lot of limitations, but it's still data and still an interesting study to look at, especially because the Mediterranean diet is always touted as the #1 diet. Now, understand that even though the Mediterranean diet is extremely specific in how you eat, the setup of what you eat, maybe not the exact foods, it makes sure that you're eating whole grains, whole foods, plant-based with minimal meat consumption, minimal animal product consumption. And the IF group was just ad libitum, and still they were close in the analysis of the metabolic health. Although Mediterranean edged it utilizing a specific diet protocol, while intermittent fasting was eat whatever you want. That's not to say that you can be unhealthy and you're going to match or be close to things like the Mediterranean diet. That's not what I'm saying. I'm sure that the participants tried their best to eat healthy or were eating healthier one day versus another day, but it's a little polarizing to see something like the Mediterranean diet that is so specific in what you eat, and then something being ad libitum where you can eat whatever you want, and then having more weight loss, but then also still coming close to the health markers that they saw in the Mediterranean group. So when it was all said and done, the researchers decided that, well, you can use both intermittent fasting and the Mediterranean diet to get some positive benefits out of it. There are some adherence issues with both, but one didn't appear to be superior over the other, considering that they were canceling each other out, as the Mediterranean diet edged out IF in metabolic health, but IF edged out the Mediterranean diet in weight loss. But let's talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to this kind of a setup, when it comes to this battle. The elephant in the room is that intermittent fasting is not a diet. It is a chameleon of some sorts that allows you to get into the realm of building metabolic health and losing weight without specifically restricting yourself to any specific diet. If you wanted to be vegan, you can do intermittent fasting. If you were doing the carnivore diet, you can do intermittent fasting. If you were doing keto, you could do intermittent fasting. And if you were doing the Mediterranean diet, you could also do intermittent fasting. You aren't restricted to not doing that because you're doing intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting does not eliminate being able to do the Mediterranean diet. So it's somewhat comical that they even compared it as if you can choose one or the other, when in reality, intermittent fasting can encompass all of these other diets because it is not a specific diet regimen. It doesn't tell you what to eat, it just tells you when to eat. That's the biggest elephant in the room. The second kind of down point to this is that they used the 5-2 diet. And the reason I even included this study and made this video was because the participants overwhelmingly decided to skip breakfast and lunch and go right to dinner during their fasted days with the 5-2, because the 5-2 diet symbolizes 5 days of eating how much you want and then 2 days where you restrict yourself to about 700, 600 calories. But when they restricted themselves to that 700, 600 calories, they waited till later in the evening to eat. So that let me talk about this study in this video, because you know, if you've seen any of my videos from the past, I'm not fond of studies that look at 5-2 or modified alternate day fasting that lets you consume calories when you should be fasting. So those fasting days, they weren't fasting. They fasted in the morning and the afternoon into the evening, but they weren't fasting the whole day. I would be interested to see what an intermittent fasting protocol like 16-8 versus the Mediterranean diet, the warrior diet versus the Mediterranean diet, or 1 meal a day versus the Mediterranean diet. I would be interested to see that, as there's a longer period of fasting and less time of just constantly eating. But even with that being said, just those 2 days of fasting lended itself to more weight loss than the Mediterranean diet. So that is an interesting outcome to this study methodology. I just wanted to go ahead and put this interesting study out there. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I will link the study down in the description if you want to take a look at it for yourself. And of course, as always, I want to thank my patrons for my Patreon, and I'm going to go ahead and put their names right up here. And as always, guys, I'll see you on Wednesday for another FAQ. Peace.